I can imagine sending a message to someone who's in the same age group as me, or maybe the age group below, and then they reply to me, but then the age group below them who didn't see my original message thinks they're talking to them, and they reply, and sort of, you can imagine it can get quite confusing in the text chat just because of the way that these different groups are, and the fact that you just don't see anything show up in the chat for people who are outside of your age group.
Taking a look at people's reactions to this, and one of the funnier ones was some presumably younger users posting about a Morse code system that they'd planned to use, where hitting the space bar would mean a dot, and then moving side to side would mean a slash. And this way, because you're still in the same server with these people, you'd be able to work around the restrictions.
Welcome back to Beyond the Blocks. This week we've got a deep dive into the safety challenges on Roblox, and we'll be talking about the latest features Roblox are rolling out to try and address those issues. We're your hosts. I'm Adam.
I'm Fedor.
And I'm Anthony.
Whether you're a regular user of Roblox or have never been on the platform, you've probably heard the hot topics of safety and civility framed in many different ways over the past few weeks. You might have seen Roblox's latest attempts to improve things as well. We're going to basically break down the problem, why it's become a recent focus in the news, the changes that Roblox are rolling out and what they might mean for how players experience Roblox and how developers create on the platform. So first of all, just a bit of background of the actual safety challenge that we've got at hand. Roblox is a massive platform. It's a mixed platform of all ages. One of the reasons that Roblox is so popular. It's a platform for everyone with sort of multiplayer social experience at the core, and that's something that we just don't necessarily find elsewhere on the internet at this kind of scale. So there's a lot of interesting benefits to this. There's a lot of players who want to play with existing friends. There's a lot of people who want to make new friends, usually of a similar age. It's good for people struggling with loneliness. It's good for people with very specific niche interests in something that maybe the people they know in person don't share those interests. But when you have a platform of this scale, you can find your own community who share mutual interests. And I think that's why Roblox has grown to the scale that it's currently at, that scale being 150 million daily active users. I think it's around 500 million monthly active users. A third of those are under 13, so 2/3 are above that, self-reported, and we'll get to that later. And it's actively marketed to being open to all ages, children down to age 5, no upper limit on the age.
And also, I think to interject, you mentioned different ages and stuff. And while that obviously, as we'll talk about in the coming lines, can become a dangerous thing, it's also really beneficial. When it happens correctly, like when I was younger and just starting to get into development, it was really, really beneficial to to talk to some people who were like now my age, like college age people who knew a lot more than any of the 13-year-olds I was talking to in middle school knew about programming or 3D modeling. So it's definitely a multi-sided coin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people have had educational experiences on Roblox. I think also there is an aspect of it about teaching you communication. If there are teamwork games and you've got this wide range of ages, that's an interesting, gameplay challenge of how you communicate with others. I do think there are benefits to it. So it's clear to see why it's scaled to the level that it has. But I think the interesting point with that scale is just that there's no other platform that quite does it the same. And whether that's for a good reason or not, maybe we can sort of think about as well. Obviously, this comes with its challenges. Like I say, there's a challenge with this scale. There's a challenge with this social core to the game. So we're trying to facilitate all of those nice benefits, all those really positive things about social interaction, whilst preventing some of the harms. You want to prevent accidentally revealing personal info. That could be intentional, but the person sharing it might not understand the consequences. So when we're talking about younger people on the platform, they might be trying to tell someone their age, their name, where they live, without realizing the consequences that can come with that. So Roblox has to try and prevent that from happening. There's also being tricked into revealing personal info as well that Roblox needs to prevent. So stop people from tricking others into revealing things about themselves. And the third big one is being lured off the platform. And I think if you have been paying attention to the news, and we'll maybe cover a bit more on some of the recent media coverage on this, a lot of the problems happen off platform because there are other social media platforms out there that let you share images, share videos. Roblox doesn't let you do that. But if you can get someone to go off platform, that's a big challenge as well. So how do we prevent these kind of things from happening? There's also another thing that we need to prevent as well, which is people accessing content that's not suitable for their ages. So we've seen age ratings roll out on games. There's now 18 plus games, 13 plus games, 9 plus, and 5 plus. These different games have different content. There might be ones that are slightly more violent than others, ones that allow swear words, ones that don't. So we have to sort of make sure that players only see the content that's suitable for them. So this is the challenge that Roblox is facing here. There are a couple of other problems that we're probably not going to touch more on today in this deep dive, just because they're not relevant to the recent changes. But there's also the challenge of games that aren't appropriately rated. So if the developer has either lied in the content questionnaire or maybe just misunderstood the questions, and something that should be 13 plus is being shown to younger users because it's incorrectly rated. Avatar items or emotes that break the rules, that isn't covered by the changes we'll talk about today. Player-to-player physical interactions where the movement of the character, or maybe the combination of emotes and items that individually would be safe, but together create an inappropriate scene. That's not addressed by Roblox's recent changes. Players creating UGC inside of games, so like drawing games. You can imagine people drawing inappropriate things that break the rules. That's not covered by the changes here. And I believe community forums are also not affected here. So it's just the other problems that Roblox is trying to address with these recent changes. So that's it for a bit of background. I don't know if I've missed anything there, but hopefully that gives a nice base to understanding the problem that's trying to be solved, and sort of why this is so difficult. It's a problem that has never been solved by another platform. A lot of other platforms just restrict to 13 plus and just say, younger users are too much of a challenge for us to solve. We'll just not look at it. Or what other platforms do is just turn off communication altogether. Roblox doesn't want to do either of those, so it's got to solve a challenge that no one else has solved before. So Anthony, tell us a bit more about the recent media attention and sort of why are we now seeing this in the news? Roblox has been around for 20 years. Like, why is this now the hottest topic?
Yeah, I think one of the main points that lots of people raise is that Roblox has exploded in popularity since the pandemic. So it may not be the actual frequency of these events increasing, it may just be the visibility. But basically, what that's meant is now Roblox has had high profile cases, such as Schlep, and the awareness about these issues have been really widespread. So there's been lots and lots of bad press about Roblox in sort of the mainstream media, as well as multiple lawsuits. There are a range of different lawsuits, ranging from sort of lawsuits that are almost defamatory. Some claim that Roblox is basically neglecting safety on the platform in the name of profit, whereas some are a bit tamer. But what the direction of the leadership of Roblox is thinking at the moment is probably we need to act so that there is some sort of something proving that we're not completely negligent. The more constructive lawsuits are built on the premise that Roblox is marketed towards being safe for 5+, whereas its current state may be it may be safe, but not for children of 5+. Roblox has also been banned in a number of countries. So Iraq, Algeria, Turkey, Oman, Qatar, Jordan, and China. Almost all of these are citing child safety concerns. The UAE did ban Roblox in 2018, and then they unbanned it in 2021. There is a new social media law in Australia, which has been gaining quite a lot of traction on the internet. Essentially, the new law in Australia bans all social media under 16, and there are broad definitions of what is and what is not social media. So Roblox has to prove that it's not social media and it isn't subject to being banned under that law for under 16s. Some of these changes are being rolled out to different countries first because the legal issues in each country are different.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if other countries follow suit. I think in general, it's not just Roblox with these safety challenges. I think they have been getting more and more attention, and there is more pressure on companies to do more. And we've now had a couple of decades of some of these social media platforms being around. There's more research into things, so I wouldn't be surprised if other countries roll things out. I think a blanket ban on under 16 is quite tricky. I think that is a large portion of Roblox's player base, so I do think they are trying to avoid that ban if possible, and err on the side of not being a social media platform if they can help it. So properly categorizing people's age and doing different things based on that age is probably quite an important thing, which I think leads on nicely to some of the changes that they've been rolling out.
Yeah, exactly. So, like you said, Roblox, I think there's a very popular notion. I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine about kind of her understand because I was really she'd like played Roblox a lot throughout her life, but was never like super involved into it. And I was talking to her kind of to gauge her perspective on this entire thing looking in. And she had this kind of consensus that, or at least like I've heard a common sentiment that Roblox, for some reason, does not want to fix these things. And I was kind of explaining to her that, like, obviously, as a platform, they do not, like you said, want to receive a blanket ban. And the only way they avoid that is figuring out actual changes that they can implement that work on a massive scale. Because while increasing human moderation expenses and other similar approaches certainly work and should be implemented and should continue to expand, I think. It's ultimately just such an insane scale, like with games reaching millions of concurrent players. It's just not feasible to purely just expand moderation, which leads into the first very, very controversial change that they just announced and will be rolling out right now through early 2026, which is chat segregation by age group. Essentially, how this works is that, as we've mentioned, a lot of the friction, or sorry, not friction, but a lot of these abuses of the communication systems on the platform happen when you have a younger person talking to an adult. So you have a 10-year-old who's talking to somebody who's way older, like 40 or 20 or whatever. And there's just this imbalance, and that creates the possibility for terrible things to happen. So Roblox's kind of sweeping solution to this, because like you said, they don't want to get banned off the face of every single company's app stores, is just to say, hey, you know what? You're 10 years old, you only talk to 10-year-olds. You're 16 years old, you only talk to 16-year-olds. The actual age groups are under 9, 9 to 12, 13 to 15, 16 to 17, 18 to 20, and then 21 plus. So pretty much what I described. 9-year-olds play with 12-year-olds, 10-year-olds play with 11-year-olds, but not with 21-year-olds. And on paper, I can really understand where they're coming from with this implementation. And I think kind of taking a look and a step back as to what's been going on, I understand the reasoning for this decision, but it certainly comes with a lot of, destructive potential for the entire sort of social fabric of the ecosystem. Because, like I mentioned earlier in this episode, there are a lot of really, really positive situations that occur where a younger person might be learning from an older person about, like how to program or how to communicate, or like even I remember being super into cafe games, like role play kind of situations, and A lot of my, like, by the time later in high school when I was writing like resumes and doing that kind of stuff, I'd already developed this like muscle of writing professional sounding stuff because I'd have to submit applications to be like the head of public relations at some bakery on Roblox. And that was only made possible because there were some older people who were organizing this space that us 13-year-olds could run around and pretend to be executives with our suits and stuff. So there's a lot of really positive things that are going to be just fundamentally impossible, like RP games, like working in teams, any kind of studio development where you have younger people working with other people. And Roblox does acknowledge this, so they're trying to give users options to go around this, like trusted connections, which I believe will let you play with people who are outside of your age range. But once again, this is limited to 13 plus players. So definitely a lot of players who are just going to be completely locked out of social connections on the platform.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's an interesting update. I think it's interesting that they're just doing it with the communication feature, right? Like you could theoretically still end up in a server with all these different ages, but you just won't
Yeah,
be able to talk to them. And I think that's the bit that I find a little bit strange. I'll have to see how it is when we're actually playing games and experience this. But right now, there aren't that many players who can't chat. There are some people who have it switched off or their parental controls have it switched off, but that is the minority. So usually when you join a game, if you say something in the chat to someone else, they will be able to see it and they'll usually respond. Whereas with this, because, and I guess this was a challenge pre-segregation as well, you don't know the age of any of the other players. That's quite an important thing, I think,
for
for
sure.
safety as well, to
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
know their ages. But what it means with this update is now if I talk and no one responds, is it because no one else there is in their 20s and I am? Or am I just being ignored because they don't like what I said? And you don't really know. There's no visual indicator to say no one in this server can chat with you. Sorry, you're on your own. No point talking. Versus knowing that you are all in the same age range. So that's one thing about this that I do think will be a little bit weird at first, and sort of because you don't know that in advance, you kind of have to send out a message, try to talk to people, and only then will you find that they can't talk back. Whereas if there was a little indicator next to everyone's name, I guess at least you'd have an idea that, oh, I'm only ever going to get a reply from these three people, so there's no point talking to the
It's
rest.
like a modern version of the classic computer science, like two armies on hills problem, where you have to go send a message that you receive their message, that they received your message. So,
Yeah,
and I don't know
exactly.
if you guys have seen this, but I was taking a look at people's reactions to this, and one of the funnier ones was some presumably younger users posting about a Morse code system that they'd planned to use, where hitting the space bar would mean a dot, and then moving side to side would mean a slash. And this way, because you're still in the same server with these people, you'd be able to work around the restrictions. So yeah, I think this is definitely a very controversial implementation, but I think it's a bold decision that I think they had to make because of the increasing pressure for them to do something big like this. And I think that it's possible that this is beneficial to the platform, and because of the matchmaking stuff, people complain about this quite a bit and then realize that their day-to-day experience isn't necessarily affected. But I think another pain point that we can talk about next is sort of the vulnerability of the way in which they're checking players' ages to be exploited by some of the bad actors that we're trying to prevent from talking to younger players, which I think Adam has more to say about that.
Exactly that, yeah. So I guess a follow-on change, it's all good and well having these age groups and doing behavior based on those age groups like the chat segregation, but you have to be able to trust the ages that you think the users are. So Prior to this point, we've had the ability to specify our age when we sign up to Roblox. So that's self-reported. And the third of users being under 13 that I mentioned at the start is based on self-reporting. So we don't know how many people have lied about their age to say that they're older than they are to get access to maybe some of those age-rated games that are higher than their current age. We also don't know how many people have lied to say that they're younger than they are. The only way that we've been able to verify that previously is with ID verification with a photo ID. And that's normally used by developers to help get their verified checkmark. And I think it was also used to give access to voice chat as well. What Roblox have been rolling out as part of these suite of safety changes is another way to check users' ages that doesn't require a photo ID. And that is facial age estimation, or AI age estimation, as you might hear people talk about it. So this is sort of what it says on the tin, using a bit of facial data. So using your camera, I think you have to sort of look forward, look left, look right, and it decides what age it thinks you are, compares that to the age that you have on your account. And if it doesn't think that they agree, it will update that to shift you into a different age group. So you might do it and it says it thinks you're older than you say you are, and you're actually in the 13 plus age group, and it'll chuck you over there. Or it might think that you've lied about your age and said that you're older than you are, and actually you're under 9. You need to be in that age group over there. So this, on paper, sounds like a really, really good thing, right? If this works perfectly, and that is a big if this works perfectly, then you can always catch when people have put their wrong age in, assuming that the account holder is the person doing the facial age estimation and you're accurate enough. You should never have anyone in the wrong age group. And then combine that with chat segregation, the age ratings on games. Everyone can only see and access what they're supposed to access. However, is it always 100% perfect? And what happens when it isn't is the real challenge. And I think you guys touched on this really briefly in a previous episode where they were first started rolling out the tests for this, that both of you, I think you said, experience getting confused for younger ages than you actually are.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, this came up in that conversation I was having with my friend from back home, and this is kind of an issue that has come up a lot in the tech space in general, where if you have some kind of personal information that you need to get from the user, like age, to verify that they can or can't access something, it's this kind of like fine balancing act of, on one hand, you need to collect enough information about the user to, verify that they are who they say they are this many years old. But then on the other hand, there's also a plethora of like data privacy concerns where it's like, oh, Roblox needs my driver's license and my face and my this and my that. And by the end of this, they're gonna have like access to my entire California individual like personal record and tax returns and whatnot. Um, so it's a very difficult thing to approach, and the issue that any sort of like visual technology, will run into is there will be almost certainly ways around it. Like people, specifically bad actors with bad intentions, will figure out a way to get an account that's younger or an account that's older, or have somebody do it for them, and ultimately that will break through. And the question sort of becomes, is does this change decrease the amount of people doing this? Which I really hope the answer is yes. I hope it means that, there's less kids with accounts that are, 300 years old when they're like 12. And I hope that this means that older people aren't interacting with kids as much, because that can result in a lot of really dangerous situations. But ultimately, this system does still rely on a fundamental backbone of quality moderation, which is something that I think Roblox will need to emphasize regardless.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. I don't think it's just bad actors who will be trying to fool the system. There's a couple of other categories of people who some people just don't want to give their facial data. They just
Yeah.
don't trust corporations with that. They want to be anonymous, not for any nefarious reason, but just they want to play their games and have their anonymous username, their anonymous avatar, and they might just not want to give their facial data. And I think for those people, if they try and find a way around this, it actually might cause more harm for them as well. So imagine you have, I don't know, a 10-year-old who's been faced with this and they don't want to use their facial data. One option is they say to their parent, I don't want my face on it, you do it. Parent does it. It puts them in the 18 plus category. Now your 10-year-old is getting access to 18 plus games and things that they really shouldn't have had, that they wouldn't have had if Roblox just trusted the self-reported age because they had no interest in lying about it, but it's put them in the wrong category because they let someone else's face do it. Or, substitute someone else's face for a doll or a generated image or a movie character, whatever ways people use to get around it. And I think that's quite dangerous. But I think also there's a false sense of security when you combine this with the chat segregation. Like, if you assume that this has worked perfectly and that everyone you're chatting to is within a couple years of your own age and someone has managed to get through incorrectly, that could cause more problems than if you were actually more suspicious because you knew that you could be chatting to anyone. If you trust that these are your peers that are a similar age, you might let your guard down even more than you would have done prior to that. So there are definitely some challenges here.
Absolutely. I'm very vocal about the fact that when you're playing Roblox at the moment, when you chat to someone, they could be any age, they could be anyone. And kids know this. Parents should be telling their kids this in schools. Like it should be common knowledge that you could be chatting to anyone, you don't know who they are. But when Roblox starts saying, oh, look, it's safe, we've done these things, now you're only going to be chatting to people in your own age group, now there is a potential, as you said, for people to lower their guards. I think that's one of the issues that people haven't been mentioning as much. There are popular images going around, but I think that is one of the key problems.
Yeah, I think that came up in the sort of the lawsuits and the media coverage as well, of sort of, are they false advertising, making out that it's safer than it is? And is that in itself a problem? And if we were just completely honest and Roblox were completely upfront and said, this is a risk, parents pay attention, this is a big risk, like these are all the ways that it can go wrong, then people potentially would have a safer time. But of course, as a big company that is publicly traded, admitting that there is a problem, admitting that it may not be safe and that you need to take personal steps to protect yourself, is quite kind of a fine balance, isn't it? It's a fine line to walk of making sure people are educated and people are aware of the controls that they have. And Roblox does have a lot of controls. It's just a lot of people don't know about them, because if they spend too much time informing everyone of those controls, they present as a very unsafe platform, which isn't ideal for them and their marketing department and those sorts of things. So there are conflicting priorities, conflicting things going on. I did have one more opinion on this as well, which I think we touched on it briefly earlier, about how complicated this problem is and how there probably isn't one change on its own that is the solution. And I think, we can put aside whether or not this AI model is 100% accurate or not. I think we know that it's not. And maybe you have to accept that and add other signals in to sort of improve the overall accuracy. I think David Baszucki did mention this in some recent interviews that I watched as well, that they already have other signals and they're rolling out other signals. So a really nice way to think about it is, you've got all this AI power, all these LLMs that are great at analyzing text and patterns in text. And if you combined age estimation with looking at chat logs, and you could see this person reports they're 9 years old, we think they're 9 years old from our last facial estimation, but they're typing like a 45-year-old. They're speaking with others as if they're an adult. That seems weird. Red flag. Let's request another age estimation and require that we see their face live again. And maybe the combination of these things helps provide a more accurate picture. and you could be quite creative, and hopefully Roblox are being creative about other signals that they can add. But I don't think this suite of changes is intended to be the final set that just fixes everything. So I do think some of the online sort of response to it is looking at it as if it should be. That's just worth bearing in mind from a sort of devil's advocate optimistic point of view. But yeah, that's all I wanted to add there.
I love the optimistic devil's advocate, but I certainly get what you mean. I think also another angle that they're trying to address here is that a lot of these, especially the really horrific cases that have occurred, happen off platform, and this has kind of been a thing that's been, at least in my memory, very contested in Roblox's history. That is, like, you used to not be able to link to anything at all, and then it was gated behind inexperience. That is, you couldn't link to any platforms, Twitter, Discord, whatever. Then it was behind policy service where you had to be a certain age. And then eventually, kind of, they laxed up on it a little bit. And now they're going back on that and completely removing social links from inexperience. Because fundamentally, all of these changes made to the platform are great, but if users are being led off platform, then, there's really nothing Roblox can do. And quite frankly, I mean, I wouldn't want a situation where Roblox is then going into like Discord and pulling their data, because we're getting like into very concerning kind of Big Brother territory, which I'm not a huge fan of. So I think the key takeaway really that I get from all of this is that, like you said, there isn't gonna be a silver bullet change. There isn't a button to get rid of all pedophiles on Roblox. And if there was, I'm certain they would have pressed it. I think what it really is going to have to come down to is gradually working to implement these kinds of changes, like the age estimation and the LLM stuff that can help flag increasing percentages of this kind of behavior, because ultimately there will be bypasses. But if we can gradually work to decrease the amount of these cases and how dangerous these situations can become before they're flagged by a human moderator, the safer and more civil the platform is. And that, I think that's the other element of this, is that Roblox as a public company have spent a lot of time talking about, our brilliant new AI and our brilliant facial estimation and our scanning and all of these, procedural tools that they're very cost effective and they're very exciting. As somebody who's interested in technology, they're very interesting. But I think the other thing that they also should be emphasizing is the human moderation angle. Obviously, it's impossible to moderate 400,000 people in a game or millions of people in a game, but I think expanding and keeping that human moderation backbone is incredibly important to catching the cases that do slip through the cracks of these various systems. Because that way, you can decrease the situations and go from maybe a million cases of inappropriate behavior. So that's a completely made up number, but say you have a million cases, but then 500,000 of those are flagged by face estimation because it says, hey, wait, you're a child, you can't talk to adults. And then that doesn't happen. And then another 300,000 get flagged by another feature. And then another 120,000 get flagged by another feature. So then the amount of work the human moderators have to go in and make a truly accurate decision about is less and a lot more manageable.
Yeah, that makes sense. These changes aren't in replacement of what's already there, right? There is text filtering, there is all of that, but as you say, these changes I think are hoping to prevent the harm before it happens, which feels like the right thing to do, and I think that's a very good thing to aim for, because moderation, if that was your only option, and I have seen people say, why don't you just use human moderators? I think moderation, as you say, catches it after it's happened, but harm has to have occurred to some degree before moderators can take action. Even if that harm, isn't too great, it's just someone has said something inappropriate in the chat and we moderate them before anything gets any worse. But I think the goal with these changes is to try and stop that from even happening, stop people who would offend from even being able to. And also all of the other accidental cases that I sort of talked about earlier as well. Like, not everything is sort of with a malicious intent. Sometimes there are accidental leaks of private info, and if you're just leaking your name to other people in the same age group, that's probably safer than leaking it to the entire player base of Roblox. I'm interested about the social links being disallowed and as not leaning on policy service anymore. I just want to talk about that a bit more, because previously, as you say, you could use policy service to decide this user can see social links. They're 13 plus maybe, or whatever the restriction might be based on their location. They're allowed to see social links on the website. Therefore, I can also show them a social link in the game. I wonder why they're removing that part of it and just relying on the website. I wonder if it's just very challenging to prove that the developer has implemented policy service correctly, and whether they're just sort of dealing with that by saying no links at all. Then we don't have to check if you've done it correctly or not. It's just, if we see a link in a game, it shouldn't be there, boom, the game is gone. And that's sort of a way to just maybe deal with it quite quickly.
But I think a big part of the problem is that Roblox players are very determined and they will get to the Discord. Like, Roblox are not stopping that, in my opinion. And I think the real big problem here is that once they get on that Discord, which is most likely going to happen, that can be run by anyone. It could be a person with a criminal record. There's literally no checks. There's Discord moderation, but as you said, Discord moderation, it has a reputation of being fairly minimal and only happens after the harm's been done. So I think there is possibly a lot more work to be done on the side of the communities and the communication outside of playing the game, rather than focusing on what's happening as you're playing the game.
That makes sense. I think that's also why Roblox have been investing quite a bit in upgrading communities, adding forums, ideally trying to make it so that you don't need to go off platform. If you want to, you can, and make sure that you're the right age to see those social links before sending you off platform. And then comes in the facial age estimation to make sure you're in the right age group and all these different things. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think Roblox has said very publicly, the safest thing is if we can keep people on the platform. But as developers, we struggle so hard to communicate with users on the platform. And if anything, these changes make it even harder for us to communicate with our players on the platform. So we're now incentivized to try and get them off as quick as possible so that we can actually talk to them and get information out.
It's very much this two-pronged sort of, it's really an interesting, complicated issue where, like you said, on one hand, they want to make it more usable on Roblox so people don't go off platform, but then the safer they make on platform, the less convenient it is to use, and the more likely people are to go off platform. And then also on the other hand, whenever Roblox, the company, is like, oh, you guys should all use our thing exclusively and not these other third-party communication filters, or sorry, communication platforms, that sounds incredibly anti-competitive, and they sound like a terrible evil company who just wants to have everything, even if it is based in a safety angle. And the other component of this is that even if a user doesn't find a Roblox community, like a Roblox related Discord server on Roblox, they look it up into Google. They're like, my favorite game's Discord server. And they go find some Discord server, like Anthony said, run by just about anybody on the internet. And then something terrible happens. The fact that it is a Roblox server and that the people in this server engage with Roblox will inherently implicate Roblox, the platform, which may have had nothing to do with the actual interaction, had no ability to stop that from the Google search to Discord. But they're still implicated in this because, oh, well, this is a Roblox community. So it's definitely a very, very difficult to navigate situation that Roblox finds itself in. And these kinds of solutions are hard to work on because in a lot of cases it's just completely out of Roblox's hands. So is their best option to just go ask Discord to please improve their moderation? I don't know.
I hope so. I mean, I think Discord have also received a lot of the pressure that we've been talking about from media and from lawsuits. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a bit more of a crackdown over there as well. And the more that the blame, or not even the blame, but the focus of where this is actually happening is on those off-platform services. I think we will see the same kind of lawsuits, the same kind of laws apply over there. I also do wonder if Discord's affected more heavily by, the Australian law banning social media, because that is purely for communicating with others, whereas, Roblox might be able to get by sort of claiming that that's not the core purpose. It's interesting, we touched on a little bit about how this affects developers as well. I don't know, Anthony, if you've been looking into how developers specifically are affected by some of these restrictions, because I know there's been some changes there as well.
Well, Roblox are making it so that you can't collaborate in a studio in a team create with someone who's not in your age group, or a similar age group, which has had a pretty bad reaction from the development community, because lots of people got into Roblox development through mentorship from people who are older than them. And yes, sometimes that can lead to bad situations happening, but also sometimes that can be a really positive impact as well. I think the other thing relevant to the developers is the custom matchmaking and the APIs. So there's currently no way for a developer, and there doesn't seem to be a planned way for a developer to know whether whether players are within a certain age group. So there's no real way, if you have a custom matchmaking system, that you could have one server for a certain age group, one server for a different age group. There is potentially some work. Potentially this update's been rushed and not thought through about the impacts on developers, how developers are going to deal with it. But there is an API where you can check if two players can chat. Will that be updated? Hopefully. But yeah, the core idea is
yeah, it's
strange
interesting.
table
I think
of
the
who
maths
can
can get
chat
quite
to who.
confusing trying to check that two players can talk, because there's this overlap where you have your age group, and I think you can talk to an age group above and an age group below. And so you could, in theory, for one person, grab people who are in those eligible groups, but then the next group up, they can talk to that one, but also the one above. And so you're trying to group these people together into a party to be in a custom matchmade server. You're going to have a tough challenge to sort of navigate. And as you say, you don't see the raw groups, so you can't even centralize around two specific groups. I can imagine sending a message to someone who's in the same age group as me, or maybe the age group below, and then they reply to me, but then the age group below them who didn't see my original message thinks they're talking to them, and they reply, and sort of, you can imagine it can get quite confusing in the text chat just because of the way that these different groups are, and the fact that you just don't see anything show up in the chat for people who are outside of your age group.
Yeah, which is, I think, why they're really pushing this matchmaking API, which I've actually gotten to spend, sorry, not API, but rather just entire matchmaking overhaul. And to their credit, I actually did get the opportunity to mess around with it a little bit in one of my games, not focusing on age groups, but just some like latency related stuff, because I had a game that was very impacted by large latencies between two players. And it actually was super easy to use. So I think their kind of approach to this is that they recognize that the system is gonna kind of fall apart if a server isn't entirely homogeneous in its age groups, and like it'll create these weird, very unfun social situations where like you can talk to some people and people can talk to you, but not really they can. And for developers, like you guys said, it's massively complicated. So it seems like their solution is just take that all away out of the hands of developers who might mess it up, put it into this dev portal thing, let us configure it a little bit, but then ultimately it comes down to Roblox to decide who gets to talk, who doesn't, and how they get put together into servers. Definitely a hands-on approach with this change for sure.
Well, that concludes our deep dive into the latest safety features that Roblox have been rolling out and our thoughts on it all. It's a complicated issue, so we'll link to all of our sources, both optimistic and pessimistic, in the description in case you want to carry on reading. We'll also link to Roblox's safety docs so that you can find all of the parental controls and privacy settings that Roblox has on its platform. We'll be back to our usual programming next week, covering all the latest Roblox news and features. Beyond the Blox is produced by Seb Jensen for Last Level Studios. Watch on YouTube and Spotify, or listen wherever you get your podcasts. Catch highlights every week on TikTok, Reels and Shorts, or visit lastlevel.co.uk/podcast for more.